Randy Marsh. Has a character in TV history ever undergone a transformation like Randy? Over the course of 23 seasons of South Park, Randy has gone from a simple father and geologist to an obsessive weed farmer who literally caused the ongoing pandemic. A truly wild evolution. But honestly, if you follow Randy's journey over these 23 seasons, the funny thing is that this development actually feels really natural and earned. He didn't just become an obsessive oaf one day, they slowly introduced certain quirks to Randy's personality, and those quirks evolved and developed over time. Randy went from being a moderately utilized secondary character to arguably the star of the entire show. And while there are some people who take exception to Randy's presence at the forefront of South Park these days, I think the journey itself is a fascinating one. So let's comb over 23 seasons worth of the man with absolutely no integrity and explore the evolution of Randy Marsh.
I don't know. Maybe I'll drink a few more beers and see where the party takes me.
Randy's first appearance comes in the third episode of the series, Volcano, though it wasn't yet revealed that he is Stan's dad. He's introduced as the town geologist who ultimately saves the town from an erupting volcano. All things considered, he's a pretty normal and competent dude in this first appearance. He alerts the mayor about the volcano eruption, finds a solution, and executes it. Although, he does burn down Denver in the process. While Randy is present in many episodes of South Park over the first 8 seasons or so, there are really only a handful of episodes that bring Randy to the forefront of the conflict, and often that is through his son Stan. That being said, they do start to set up some traits that end up defining Randy pretty substantially later on. In episode 212 Clubhouses, Randy and Sharon decide to get a divorce after fighting incessantly.
Don't interrupt me. You always interrupt me when I talk. Can't you see that
I don't interrupt you.
This isn't really portrayed as anything overly dramatic, it's mostly played for laughs, exaggerating the types of things that happen when a couple gets divorced. We see Sharon immediately move on to a new man, while Randy gets a nice new convertible and starts partying, quickly taking to single life. But this is mostly portrayed from Stan's point of view. While the episode is mostly parodying the effects of divorce, this would be sort of a small hint at Randy's obsessive personality that would be showcased later. In the end, the two of them of course get back together. In 302's Spontaneous Combustion, we start to see a sort of proto-Randy, a solid example of some things that the show would start to do with Randy later on, though it's still not a huge focus. When citizens of South Park start to spontaneously combust, Randy is tasked with finding out why, since he's apparently the town's only scientist. The sequences where Randy is doing research are pretty classic. They just show him mixing random chemicals in the basement while he brainstorms. That's pretty classic. I said that already. But funny enough, Randy does figure out what's causing the spontaneous combustion.
Kenny combusted because he held his farts in for too long.
You mean all we have to do is fart and we won't explode?
Exactly.
And he literally wins a Nobel Prize for this discovery and solution, which he is then stripped of when the farting solution causes way more problems than it solves. On paper, pretty classic Randy. In execution, relatively subdued compared to what we've gotten used to. 308's Two Guys Naked in a Hot Tub is a really funny episode, but honestly, it starts to explore Randy's fears and regrets in ways the show hadn't yet. Randy actually laments his lack of freedom that comes with his life as a family man.
I love having a family and all. I just miss being able to party, drinking and socializing and experimenting with all kinds of different things.
I'll touch more on this aspect of Randy's fears later, because for now it's mostly used as an entry point for Randy to, alright, what's the monetization friendly way to say this? Pleasure himself in front of Gerald, and then get really insecure that somebody's going to find out. 408 Something You Can Do With Your Finger feels like a really good early example of some of Randy's weirder quirks and interests being revealed. Randy is absolutely furious that Stan is in a boy band, and his attitude towards the whole thing is really funny. It feels like they were starting to feel out a lot of the fun traits that they could roll with later in the show for Randy. We learned that when Randy was 18 years old, he too was in a boy band, Ghetto Avenue Boys, and he was wildly successful for a year of his life. Unfortunately, the music industry spit him out as quickly as it ate him up.
Because all the fame, the money, the women, all it did was build me up so that I could be knocked down harder than anybody in the world.
Honestly, I think this line here is actually really revealing, and the show slowly starts to paint a picture of this sad, regretful father who is afraid that his best days are behind him. These aren't the only episodes in early South Park that feature Randy heavily, but they are the ones that sort of individualize him. He still does plenty of other weird, quirky stuff throughout this era of South Park, but honestly, for a huge chunk of the other episodes, it's the entire town that goes along with these weird, quirky situations. Randy is often just a part of a bigger mob that's partaking in these strange events. Outrage about Chin Pokemon's effect on kids? Randy's there. Civil War reenactment? Randy. Becoming zombified by Ritalin? Randy's there too. He sort of leads the charge in leaving the church and becoming atheists, which a lot of people end up doing in this episode, and also starts shitting out of his mouth. South Park embracing the metrosexual lifestyle? Oh, you know Randy's there.
It's super fabulous. Would you like some Shiraz?
He's at the forefront of the pro/anti-war conflict in I'm a Little Bit Country. He becomes obsessed with Walmart when the town builds one. He convinces the whole town to double down when they try to win South Park back from the casino.
Stan, okay? You just don't understand the fine points of gambling. You're never supposed to stop when you're on a winning streak.
There are honestly countless examples of Randy going along for the ride with the other citizens of South Park. A major aspect of the show has always been the town of South Park itself getting really caught up in ridiculous conflicts. And usually when Randy was a part of them, he was sort of just our window into the townspeople. He wasn't necessarily a standout. Like in A Little Bit Country, yeah, he's one at the forefront of the anti-war protests, but he's mostly just representing half of the town. There's nothing inherently Randy about his actions in the episode. He's just our access point into this side of the conflict. Though episodes like My Future Self and Me do start to show off some of Randy's quirks through some of these town-wide situations. And some episodes maybe put a tad more of a focus on Randy, even though it's a town-wide conflict. Like when the Walmart moves into town.
Dad, you're a geologist.
I'll make less money, sure, but as long as I buy everything at Walmart, it'll all even out.
But overall, these early seasons of South Park primarily showcase Randy as a slightly more prominent South Park citizen, and not nearly as much as an individual. But in season 9, one episode would change that forever.
I'm not allowed to stand up for myself? I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America?
Episode 905, The Losing Edge, is, in my opinion, a perfect episode of South Park. I mean, I could go on for days about this episode. It balances a hilariously clever and subversive conflict for the kids with a gut-busting Randy-focused subplot, but for this video, let's just talk about how this episode completely shaped the future of Randy Marsh. In this episode, Randy becomes obsessed with getting drunk and fighting other dads at Stan's baseball games. In fact, it totally becomes its own sport for him. The pride that Randy feels for beating up these other dads is immeasurable. It's possibly the thing that he's most proud of accomplishing in his entire life.
I worked hard, believed in myself, and now I'm gonna be fighting in the state championship game.
I think this is actually a really natural evolution from what we've learned about Randy. Those fears that he talked about in the hot tub, his insecurities about life passing him by. This is seemingly the first instance of Randy embracing something new that is just for him. Something he is invested in that is completely his own, and an accomplishment no less. This also marks another important occasion, one of the first times that Sharon starts to get super fed up with Randy's bullshit, which would come into play later. Oh yeah, and on top of all this, the episode showcased that Randy is absolutely f***ing hilarious.
You want a piece of me? Because I'm pretty sick of your goddamn mouth.
What do you want to do, huh?
Look, Randy was funny before this, but by showcasing him in these elevated, drunken, ridiculous states, they were able to convey a performance for Randy that they hadn't before, and I think it unlocked something special for the show. Something they maybe didn't realize that they actually had until now. Randy is comedy gold, and from here on out, he became a much more prominent character on South Park. He was still used very often as our townspeople surrogate, so when the town is going through some weird fad or obsession, we would still often see that through Randy. Episodes like You Have Zero Friends saw him get really caught up in the Facebook fad.
Well, so, are you gonna add me as a friend?
He had a hilarious role in Night of the Living Homeless.
Look, Glenn, we're safe!
He's at the forefront of the celebrations when Obama becomes president.
Yeah! Yeah, Obama! Change! It's change!
He basically leads the town in their weird worshipping of the economy.
Finger pointing gets us nowhere!
Steve!
And he took the nationwide queefing conflict to Congress. They also started giving Randy significant subplots in kid-centric stories. One of the most memorable is obviously Make Love Not Warcraft. The focus of this episode is the kids' struggles to play World of Warcraft, but they gave a substantial subplot to Randy trying to play the game as well.
Randy, you working on that sediment analysis? Not now, Nelson. I just joined a big party of night elves and we're gonna explore the Tower of Azora together.
And this riffs pretty well on those insecurities that we've been seeing slowly surface for Randy as the show goes on. He becomes more and more obsessive over seemingly trivial things, and oftentimes things that are loved by younger generations. Randy is initially confused by World of Warcraft, but quickly gives it a try for himself. Hey, he even saves the day before being killed in front of Stan. Or even episodes like Fantastic Easter Special, where we find out that Randy is a part of the Hair Club for Men, a secret society that keeps the secret of Easter.
with all the frills upon it, I'll be the grandest lady in the Easter parade.
Side note, this is one of my favorite episodes of the whole show. The idea is hilariously Randy, but it's also mostly just the inciting incident for Stan's big Easter adventure. They just start to utilize him in a more foundational supporting role, rather than just part of the town. But the biggest change after The Losing Edge was that we started to get episodes that were basically 100% Randy episodes, and we would usually get at least a couple a season. Even the end of season 9 throws Randy to the forefront of the show again in Bloody Mary, when Randy gets pulled over for drunk driving.
What seems to be the officer problem?
This episode actually deals with Randy's addictive personality, but it also does so in the most Randy way possible. When an AA meeting tells Randy that his alcoholism is a disease, Randy takes this, well, about as far as you'd expect Randy to take it.
This disease is just eating me up. I hate my illness!
After this, we see so many Randy-centric episodes that continue to elevate the Randyisms to a ridiculous degree. Season 11's Apologies to Jesse Jackson shows Randy, well, we all know what Randy does in this episode. Just ludicrous stupidity, and his response to the controversy is equally ludicrous. Season 13's Pinewood Derby is another of my personal favorites, and this is basically just a Randy highlight factory. He's so desperate for Stan to win the Pinewood Derby that he steals a superconducting magnet from the Large Hadron Collider. Because of this, the car literally breaks warp speed, leading to first contact with alien life. But because of Randy's complete incompetence, he basically leads the human race down the exact wrong path. In the end, it turns out that the aliens were testing the human race to see if they were worthy of being a part of their intergalactic federation, and Randy's leadership gave them their answer, a resounding no way.
Since you did not return the space cache, your species and your planet is hereby forever blocked off and barred from the rest of the universe.
I mean, to be fair, the entire planet goes along with Randy's awful plan, so it's not all on him, but he did lead the way. In fact, Randy is shown to lead a lot of weird fads. Season 14's Medicinal Fried Chicken is a particularly egregious example of this. When a medical marijuana dispensary opens up in South Park, Randy literally gives himself cancer so that he can get high all the time. Can I show this? I don't know if I can even show this. I guess I'll do some blurring. But Randy also ends up convincing all of his friends in town to do the same thing. This is so funny, but it's another example of the lengths Randy would go to feed his addictive personality. And the show also goes to great lengths to explore the depths of Randy's insecurities. In the episode More Crap, Randy breaks the world record for largest dump ever taken. He instantly gets competitive about it, and he is so depressed when his record is beaten by Bono. Look, this is absolutely one of the most ridiculous episode premises in South Park history, but you cannot deny that it truly explores Randy on a substantial and meaningful level.
I know that this late in my life, I'll never come so close to finally having meaning.
The longer the show continues, the more they explore Randy's regrets and his desires to leave some sort of lasting impact on the world, to have some sort of major success that gives his life the meaning he craves. This idea is also further explored in season 14's Cream Fraiche. I can't say this title without laughing. This episode is where Randy becomes completely obsessed with the Food Network and becoming a celebrity chef. He even starts working at the school cafeteria.
Today we're gonna be making the students my tasty baked ziti with basil and fresh mozzarella.
Damn, remember Chef? I miss Chef. This episode ultimately gives an alternative explanation for Randy's Food Network obsession, but this again illustrates Randy's desire to be something more than what he already is. And this actually comes to a head in an incredible season 15 episode, You're Getting Old. This episode is genius, one of my favorites of the whole show. I know I've said that a bunch already. And Randy's story is very much secondary to Stan's, but it also says a lot about the state of South Park. Honestly, I think I might do a separate video on this episode and its place in South Park history, but for now let's focus on Randy. The episode is specifically about Randy's refusal to admit that life is passing him by. The kids are all into a new music genre called tweenwave, which pointedly sounds like literal shit to Randy and all other adults.
Oh, come on. That music sounds like shit.
No, it's just young and hip, so you don't get it, Sharon.
But Randy will not admit that he isn't hip to the new trends. He falsely claims that he actually loves the music, even though it's abundantly clear that it sounds like shit to him. In fact, he even tries to start performing his own tweenwave music, thinking that this might be his chance to actually make it big as a musician. And the results are, well,
I got a fever, but it's under control.
This is not only hilarious, but it lines up so well with what we know about Randy and his history. Randy was in a boy band at age 18 and tasted success, but that success was short-lived. We learned in the Guitar Hero episode that Randy played guitar and had dreams of being a rock star that never panned out. And through so many of these episodes that we've talked about, Randy has desperately tried to capture some sort of new success in life. But Randy's antics finally catch up to him in his relationship with Sharon, who is just completely fed up with his behavior. And she cites all of these same things that we've been talking about as the reason for this.
You do this all the time! First, you're obsessed with baseball fights. Then you need to play Warcraft. Then you gotta be a celebrity chef.
The two of them argue until they actually get to the root of the issue.
Because I'm unhappy, okay? I've been unhappy for a long time.
Now, this is definitely metatextual and has a lot to do with how Matt and Trey were feeling about the show itself at the time, which again, I'd really like to make a video about, but this also says a ton about Randy as a character. After all, in a lot of ways, Randy is a reflection of Matt and Trey themselves, so it all kind of ties together. The reason that Randy continues to become more bombastic and obsessive and journey down these ridiculous story paths is because he isn't happy with his life, something that has been really well established over the course of the show. This episode actually ends with Sharon and Randy getting divorced. And honestly, the montage set to Fleetwood Mac's Landslide is really emotionally affecting. Okay, maybe the song is just emotionally affecting no matter what, but I love this sequence. And while this episode and its follow-up did sort of put out the idea that the show and its characters needed a change and shouldn't just reestablish the status quo, they sort of throw that idea away for a quick joke.
Get in the car, Stan. Your mom and I are moving back in together.
What?
We worked it out, pal. Surprise!
Which is a really funny moment, admittedly. But even though it seemed like they were going to return back to the status quo, over the following 8 seasons, the show really started to see some major changes. For a few seasons, Randy continues his ridiculous plans as expected. In Broadway Brodown, he becomes obsessed with Broadway musicals, even venturing to write one for himself, which is a little autobiographical for Matt and Trey. In season 16, Randy creates a football replacement sport called Sarcastaball and even becomes the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He buys a Blockbuster Video in the year 2012, thinking that it's his ticket to finally being successful.
And some gifts for the kids too. After all, we're rich now.
This turns into a full-blown Shining parody and Randy nearly kills his family, but it's also just another example of how desperate Randy is to find a new success in his life. In season 17, Randy becomes a mall security guard for Black Friday, initially just planning on using his position to get a better spot in line for Black Friday deals, but eventually becoming fully invested in the massive war that is holiday shopping. But in season 18, the show starts to try something new. Serialization, at least in small doses. This wasn't a fully serialized season, but there were aspects of each episode that continued to cross over through the entire thing. And for Randy in season 18, there was one thing that played out all season long.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I am Lord, yeah, yeah, yeah. Lord, Lord, come in, Lord, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's right, for season 18, Randy was moonlighting as music sensation Lord, all while still working as a geologist. This is definitely Randy's biggest accomplishment, though it seems that it maybe didn't bring him all that much joy since he was sort of pretending to be someone else. In fact, in the middle of the season, he even takes a little break to pursue cock magic, apparently something that he used to do in college. This is another of my favorite episodes. You should go watch it if you haven't seen it. But it appears that Randy's career as Lord was short-lived because in season 19, he's onto all kinds of new ventures. He joins a PC frat, he spearheads the attempts to gentrify parts of South Park so that they can get a Whole Foods.
Yes, it's where the presidential candidate is from. No, hold on. Soda sopa. We have a soda sopa, the town is completely different.
Interestingly, this was actually a pretty Randy light season, and both seasons 20 and 21 are similar. For season 20, the first truly and fully serialized season, Randy's throughline has a lot to do with his addiction to member berries, basically nostalgia fruit. It ultimately culminates in Randy being sort of zombified and possessed, but this lines up pretty effectively with the addictive tendencies we've seen from him over the entire show. Season 21 has a couple Randy-focused episodes. He has a show called White People Renovating Houses.
I do the construction and practice MMA in my spare time.
He becomes really fixated on canceling Columbus Day, even though he previously was super obsessed with Christopher Columbus.
You have to understand, it was 2013. Everyone was stoked on Columbus back then.
Pretty standard Randy action, hyperfixations coupled with ridiculous stupidity. It kind of seems like the show was just running through the motions with Randy after a stint as Lord, giving him a few episodes a year and having fun with him. But everything would change in season 22.
So I loaded up the kids, took my wife by the arm, and I moved on out to a Colorado farm.
In season 22, Randy gets fed up with his life and the people of South Park, and he moves his family to the valley to become weed farmers. Some people take issue with this development, but it actually makes plenty of sense given what we know about Randy. We know he's been unhappy with his life and is constantly trying to fill that void with new careers and experiences. I mean, he's been a geologist, boy band member, Walmart employee, cafeteria chef, Broadway musical writer, coach of the Denver Broncos, mall security guard, owner of Blockbuster Video, music sensation lord, cock magician, host of White People Renovating Houses, and now, finally, a weed farmer. But this is also something that speaks to his addictive personality. I mean, he's been addicted to gambling, alcohol, heroin hero, weed, internet porn, member berries, crack, and weed again. Season 22 has a lot of fun with Tegridy Farms for this one episode, and then it sort of acts as a minor subplot / throughline for the remainder of the season. Events take place there, like Man Bear Pig mauling Ned, but there isn't much of a focus on it story-wise until the season finale, Bike Parade. But this season finale, I think, is really important for Randy's development moving forward. Because of the Amazon strike, Randy starts getting a huge amount of traffic through Tegridy Farms. Like, probably the most success he's ever seen in his life, save for Lord, but we won't count that. And pretty quickly, this goes to Randy's head. He does end up helping the town take down Jeff Bezos by getting everyone stoned enough not to care about the Amazon strike, but chasing down the success leads directly into season 23, which is a different show entirely. And I mean that literally. The South Park theme song is nowhere to be found. Completely replaced by the new Tegridy Farms title sequence. Randy Marsh was now, fully and officially, the star of South Park. The first 6 episodes of the season are literally episodes of Tegridy Farms, and Randy is the main character throughout. But the through line for these episodes is how through selling weed with quote-unquote Tegridy, Randy starts to chase success, and in the process, completely loses all Tegridy. In the first episode of Tegridy Farms, Randy literally bombs the home grow ops of South Park residents because they're taking away his business. In the second episode, he makes a deal with communist China, who uses his weed to plant on protesters. This episode would actually get South Park banned in China. He starts selling plant-based burgers using his leftover product, claiming it's for the environment, but then proceeds to murder an entire herd of cattle because he doesn't know what to do with them. Tegridy Farms is about a man who has achieved success beyond his wildest dreams and completely loses sight of what is right and wrong in the process. The show focuses on Randy for the first 6 episodes of the season before airing the Tegridy Farms quote-unquote season finale. But then in South Park's actual season finale, the 10th episode of the season, they run back to Randy to ask for help to get the town in the Christmas spirit, and his solution: to sell everyone weed that is caked. And this just continues into the pandemic special. We see Randy showcase probably the least Tegridy yet, revealing that when in China, Randy actually created the coronavirus. I'm not gonna show you how though. I'm pretty sure I'll get demonetized. The entire special, he tries to fix the problem, but not because he feels remorse. It's simply because he doesn't want to get caught. No damn Tegridy. The funniest thing about Randy and Tegridy Farms is how he's sort of being used to convey meta commentary to the audience from Matt and Trey. The general response to Tegridy Farms from the fan base has been, please go back to South Park. So basically, Matt and Trey say this in the show through Randy.
You know, is it me, or are people starting to not be that stoked on Tegridy Farms?
But they also sort of mock the fans about it in really funny ways.
Did everyone enjoy the Halloween special?
No, Randy. Only you did.
Oh, well, that was pretty much my target audience anyway.
Even after the vaccination special, which in so many ways resets the show back to the status quo, they still make it clear that Randy isn't done with Tegridy Farms. And honestly, I'm pro Tegridy Farms. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but I'd rather the creators of the show have fun and find creative inspiration than try to force the show to be what it used to be. I don't want a soulless imitation of South Park's classic seasons. I want inspired stories that they're excited to tell. So for now, Randy Marsh is the owner and operator of Tegridy Farms, and he had a wild journey getting there. He started as a pretty simple father and geologist. We were slowly introduced to some funny quirks and obsessions, which then evolved into wild hyperfixations and career changes in the midst of a midlife crisis, and finally settled into a weed farmer with absolutely no Tegridy. If we looked at Randy in the first season and the most recent season, you probably wouldn't be able to tell it's the same character. But when you watch the series beginning to end, it couldn't have happened any other way. Over the course of South Park's history, no character has increased prominence more than Randy Marsh. In fact, I previously did an entire video tracking Randy's evolution from sparingly used generic father into heavily relied upon buffoon who is arguably the show's main character. And when making that video, there was one episode in particular that was clearly the turning point for Randy. One episode that shifted Randy from a pretty typical South Park citizen into a prominent, goofy, overly obsessive oaf. That episode is, of course, The Losing Edge, the Little League Baseball episode in which Randy becomes completely obsessed with getting in fights with other dads at Stan's baseball games. So, since we last looked at the episode that changed Eric Cartman forever, today, let's dive in and look at not only what makes The Losing Edge an incredible episode in itself, but exactly how it shifted the way the show utilized Randy forever. Despite this being such an important transitionary episode for Randy, it still represents a classic South Park formula. While Randy's story is a big part of the episode, it's still the B story, while the kids' desperate attempts to stop playing baseball is the A story. And beyond the fact that this is such an important episode for Randy's evolution, it's also just a classically excellent episode, hilariously conceived from an incredibly simple idea.
This is our big baseball show. This whole idea started with the brilliant concept of wouldn't the boys be cute in baseball outfits.
I will talk later about how perfectly the A and B story coalesce into the climax, but first, let's talk briefly about how Randy was used before this episode shifted his trajectory. In early South Park, Randy was basically just a generic dad and the town geologist. He was focused on occasionally, but usually in side plots or in relation to either his son Stan or to the town as a whole. His introduction saw him save the town from a volcano eruption, also destroying Denver in the process. Other noteworthy early Randy stories include the episode where he and Sharon get divorced, leading to his sort of midlife crisis, gets his ear pierced, buys a convertible, starts partying with younger women. Nothing too crazy, but a sort of hint at what was to come. While there were other Randy-focused stories, like when he discovered what was causing the citizens of South Park to spontaneously combust, or when he lamented the loss of his role in a boy band, the Ghetto Avenue Boys, to Stan, it's mostly the big town-wide stories that start to show what we might expect from Randy in the future. While he obviously wasn't the only one involved, typically when the town started to become obsessed with whatever new idea or fad was in the zeitgeist, Randy was at the forefront. And often, we'll see these town shenanigans through Randy. Whether that's when the parents are worried about Shin Pokemon, or the town is obsessed with gambling, or everyone has been zombified by Ritalin, all of these things show Randy's obsessions are in line with the town's obsessions. The whole pro versus anti-war debate in I'm a Little Bit Country, the town's obsession with the Walmart that moves in, and of course the metrosexual fad in South Park is gay.
Hey guys, there's a sale at Express for Man!
Okay, all that to say that Randy has always had some obsessive tendencies, but they typically went hand in hand with the town itself, as though he was our surrogate for the town storylines. But it seems like this episode, The Losing Edge, is the one that helped Matt and Trey fully realize just how hilarious Randy's obsessive behavior can be. And it's also one that really starts to elaborate on an idea we saw hints of earlier in the show, that Randy has not had all that much success in his life and has a lot of regrets about some of his dreams not working out the way they did.
Because all the fame, the money, the women, all it did was build me up so that I could be knocked down harder than anybody in the world.
This is what leads to Randy becoming wildly obsessed with fighting and beating up other dads at Stan's Little League games. Randy is fully embracing his obsessive tendencies in an arena in which he is seeing huge success. It is just undeniably funny to see Randy be this proud over something this stupid.
I worked hard, believed in myself, and now I'm gonna be fighting in the state championship game.
And it's such a silly ass thing to be proud of that it perfectly sets up the future of Randy Marsh. After Randy's stint as the best drunken dad fighter in Little League, they start to utilize Randy in this obsessive idiot role far more often, and maybe more importantly, they start to do more episodes where Randy is the primary character. Whether that's his massively embarrassing faux pas on Wheel of Fortune, his stealing of part of the Large Hadron Collider for Stan's Pinewood Derby car, giving himself cancer so that he can get medicinal cannabis, his attempts to beat the world record for biggest crap ever taken, his borderline sexual obsession with becoming a celebrity chef in creme fraiche. The list goes on, but it all started with The Losing Edge, the first episode to really focus on Randy as this obsessive oaf. And they even cite this one pretty specifically in one of my favorite episodes, You're Getting Old, which I did a video on years ago. When Sharon chastises Randy for his increasingly erratic behavior, this is the first thing she brings up.
You do this all the time! First, you're obsessed with baseball fights. Then you need to play Warcraft.
And this would obviously escalate to even more insane levels as the show goes on, particularly given the Tegridy farms of it all. I mean, Randy basically became the main character for a couple of seasons, but it all started with him winning that first fight at his son's baseball game in The Losing Edge, the episode that changed Randy forever. But like I said before, it's also just a flat out excellent episode of South Park. In other episode breakdowns I've done, I've talked about what I consider to be that perfect South Park setup in so many of the classic episodes, generally starting with the kids want to do kid things, which then of course moves into some insane escalation. But what's great about this episode is that it takes this idea and subverts it slightly. Typically, a sports-themed episode of any sitcom or a sports-themed movie is all about trying to win against all odds. What makes this one so damn funny is that the kids hate playing baseball.
No more baseball! No more boring baseball until next year!
Unfortunately, they just keep winning, sending them further into the playoffs against their will. And since none of the other kids want to play either, they play even worse than South Park.
You have to swing when it's a ball, otherwise you're gonna walk to first base. Don't swing only if it's a strike.
It's not only a great subversion of that South Park formula, but a hilarious subversion of this old sports story trope. Rather than being an underdog team doing everything they can to get better to edge out their opponents, like, say, the Mighty Ducks, the boys are a good team trying to do everything they can to get worse so that they can actually enjoy their summer.
All the other teams are worse than us.
Yeah, let's face it, we're winners.
They even parody the whole finding a great undiscovered player as their secret weapon trope by bringing back Kyle's cousin Kyle, since he's so horrendously unathletic.
Don't throw the ball too fast because I may get startled and I have asthma.
This is one of only a few appearances across the entire series for cousin Kyle, and it's a pretty ingenious use for him too. But I think the smartest thing about The Losing Edge is the way its A and B story parallel each other and then intertwine so perfectly at the climax. The entire episode, the boys are deeply, deeply upset because they keep winning their baseball games, while Randy is the happiest he's ever been because he keeps winning his drunken dad fights. Fights that can only happen because the boys are winning their games against their own wishes. The boys and Randy's desires in this episode are at complete odds with each other. There's even this great moment where Stan tries to open up to Randy, but decides not to because he thinks that Randy is so excited about Stan's accomplishment.
Dad, we need to talk.
Can you believe it, Stan? The state championship game.
Of course, Randy's pride here is completely self-serving and egotistical. It's not about Stan at all, it's about himself. On top of this, the entire episode, Stan is just fully embarrassed by Randy's fighting antics each and every time it happens. For Stan, literally every single thing about this baseball season is a complete disaster, which makes the resolution so perfect. With South Park completely decimating Denver in the state championship and absolutely no hope for their summer to return to normal, Randy starts fighting Bat Dad, who is played by the incomparable Diedrich Bader.
You ain't got a chance, South Park! Here we go, Denver! Here we go!
And suddenly, for this final sequence, Randy and Stan's goals are no longer at odds. Randy's fighting is putting South Park at risk of being forced to forfeit. Now, he's the boys' only chance at freedom from the clutches of Little League Baseball.
Come on, Dad, get up! Get up! You have to fight!
It's just so funny to see Randy's obsessive buffoonery be celebrated. He didn't actually have any idea that he was helping his son, but by beating up Bat Dad and getting their team disqualified, they both got exactly what they want. Honestly, this is one of the better father-son moments between Randy and Stan in the entire series.
Dad! You're the greatest.
And while I personally am a huge Randy fan and have loved the direction that they've taken him over the course of South Park, I can't help but look back at this episode and think that this really was the perfect balance. This episode was obviously that important turn for Randy, but it was able to tell a silly, obsessive Randy story without sacrificing the kid-centric story on the other end. In fact, Randy's B story actually only enhances the kids' baseball story. They tie together in such a beautiful, seamless way. It is, in my opinion, another example of South Park at its best, showcasing multiple things that it does brilliantly within one single episode and not allowing either of those things to take a backseat to the other one. Not only a massively important episode for the evolution of Randy, but a flat-out top-tier episode across the board. As South Park has evolved over the years, many characters have evolved alongside the show, and one of the most obvious evolutions is Randy Marsh. I've talked a ton about Randy on this channel, including the episode that seemed to be his biggest turning point, but with his evolution came an array of profoundly stupid types of behavior. Maybe the most insane showcase of Randy's stupidity is the episode Medicinal Fried Chicken, which also features a great selfish Cartman subplot and some very funny social satire. And though there are countless candidates for stupidest thing Randy Marsh has ever done, I think it's clear that this episode contains the stupidest thing Randy Marsh has ever done in South Park. The entire idea for Medicinal Fried Chicken started as one of those sort of magical, happenstantial South Park brainstorms. After a trip to Colorado, Matt and Trey started talking about how medical had become legalized, and they basically got caught up talking about the ebbs and flows of what substances are and aren't okay to sell.
How fatty food now is like the new, like, okay, we've got to ban that. You know, it's like how certain substances and shit become like okay in society and then other ones become not okay.
This is definitely the crux of the social commentary for the episode, and I think it's portrayed pretty brilliantly, but the way they got to the specifics of this story is kind of wild. In talking about how substances' acceptability change in society, they got to the idea of selling meat out of a KFC, which coincidentally had a real-world parallel.
I've seen that before on somewhere online, and there's a pot store in LA in Venice, in Palms, I think, that was an old KFC that somebody turned into a pot store, and it basically looked just like this. Like, so it was funny that we joked our way to a place where that basically actually existed.
The KFC in question is called Kind for Cures, pretty brilliantly keeping the KFC acronym, at least marketing-wise. And I actually remember seeing this KFC 10 plus years ago when I lived in Los Angeles, and at the time, I was fully convinced that they were inspired by South Park. But as it turns out, they inspired the show through this sort of coincidental brainstorm session. Though, once South Park aired their episode, Kind for Cure started using South Park in their own marketing via window murals. They apparently even started naming some of their strains after South Park, including Kenny's Cat Piss, Stan's Wet Dream, and South Park Kush. And I gotta say, those are f***ing terrible names, just god-awful. But while this episode idea had a pretty funny origin, the things that make it great are how it portrays Randy and Cartman, showcasing the links of Cartman's selfishness and the links of Randy's stupidity. Obviously, the kids, and particularly Cartman, are devastated that the old KFC is now a dispensary, but Randy has the opposite reaction.
All right! I love the future!
This was an era where they were really starting to embrace Randy's obsessive one-track mind, a trait that was really first explored in The Losing Edge. But this is just such a funny example of Randy going way overboard. The moment he realizes that he can get pot if he just gets a doctor's reference, he ignores everything else, including the children.
KFC's gone, been replaced. I gotta get to the doctor.
The doctor? But Dad, we want to eat.
We gotta get to the doctor.
I love the number of ways this episode showcases Randy's pure ignorance also. He has no idea medicinal dispensaries are even a thing, then he doesn't realize that you need a medical card to use them, and then when he goes to the doctor to get one, he has absolutely no clue how or why you would even need one.
You are in fine shape. Well, that sucks.
And this leads to, as I mentioned up top, what has got to be the absolute stupidest thing that Randy has ever done in his entire life, which is saying a lot considering his track record.
Doctor, how do most people get cancer? Well, there's a lot of ways you can get cancer. Yeah, but what's the quickest way?
This is such a funny evolution of Randy's obsessive tendencies overlapping with his stupidity. Starting with season 9's The Losing Edge, we would usually get 1 or 2 obsessive Randy stories a year. Obviously beginning with those baseball fights, he got real caught up in his quote-unquote alcoholism in Bloody Mary, he was briefly obsessed with World of Warcraft, obviously there was the entire Wheel of Fortune debacle, and his role in the Hair Club for Men. He led the entire world astray with his lies in Pinewood Derby, and as stupid as some of those things are, do any of those things remotely compare to willingly giving yourself cancer?
Luckily, most of these cancers are slow growing and can take years to develop. Damn it.
There are obviously so many other ways he could do this. He could just buy it illegally, he could pay someone who does have a card, he could go see a shadier doctor who's willing to write a script for something else.
Randy, instead of pretending he has back pain, which is really all you need to do, is just say, my back hurts or my knee hurts or some shit, and he goes and gives himself testicular cancer.
So yeah, in order to get a medical card, Randy gives himself cancer by microwaving his junk. Incredible stuff.
Mr. Marsh, I'm afraid that the test came back positive. You do have testicular cancer.
Score!
more?
I think the biggest reason that this episode is considered to be so iconic is the visual right here, which I'm sorry to say, I gotta blur it. But Randy's absolutely massive balls and the way he learns to maneuver around town on them is just insanely funny. Not to mention the way he influences all the other guys in town, but we'll get there soon. First, let's talk about the Cartman subplot, which is vintage Cartman and contains the real social commentary here. Obviously, the thing that spurs on the Randy plot is that the KFC has been replaced with a dispensary, but it also reveals that due to new legislation, fast food restaurants aren't allowed in low-income areas anymore.
KFCs were only in low-income areas. In the entire state of Colorado, Kentucky Fried Chicken is illegal.
Obviously, legislation like this never really took hold, but Matt and Trey rightfully recognized the irony that while some were fighting for people's rights to bodily autonomy with things like cannabis, others were also fighting to prevent that autonomy in regards to the food that we eat.
But it was sort of that joke, too, of like so many of the people that fight so hard for marijuana should be legal are some of the same people that are saying, get rid of KFC, get rid of Taco Bell, get rid of this stuff's bad for you. It's just like, and it doesn't matter what the truth is, they're just trying to oppress a different group of people.
Personally, I see the whole banning fast food thing as an attempted band-aid for a deeper issue, but the irony here remains. To have these kinds of fights happening simultaneously is a very funny contradiction.
For some people, they get just as high off fried chicken as other people do off weed.
And man, do I love the way they satirize this idea in this story, by basically having KFC completely take the place of cannabis and organized crime and illegal dealing.
Oh, God, yes! Where did you get that?
I have my sources. That'll be $85.
This is just a South Park flourish, but I love the fact that this kid who's acting as a full-on mob boss is also wearing a t-shirt with a tractor on it. It's that juxtaposition between the kids and the adult nonsense they get into that is always so funny.
How much KFC are we talking? 2 buckets plus a 3-piece meal and 4 sides. Holy dude.
But this guy basically ropes Cartman into his illegal KFC peddling ring, since it's now been made illegal in Colorado, and Cartman effectively becomes a fried chicken dealer.
This is cut with Boston market gravy.
Okay, I'm sorry, yo.
Honestly, this is one of my favorite subplots in South Park. It's just a perfect intersection of the things that make the show work. A great in-character motivation with Cartman becoming maniacally selfish over fast food, and solid social commentary / satire showcased through a very funny role reversal. I mean, this wasn't even the first time we'd seen Cartman's selfish behavior towards KFC. It was the entire inciting incident in the episode The Death of Eric Cartman. And as you might expect, Cartman ultimately takes over the chicken black market, seemingly just so that he can eat all the KFC he wants, even making a deal with the Colonel himself. But even though this subplot is great, it still really takes a backseat comedically to 2 things, and both of those things are hanging off Randy. And once Randy is diagnosed with cancer and gets his medical card, the entire episode dives headfirst into the absurdity and the comedy of this situation.
Randy! Jesus, Randy! Your balls!
I know, smoking pot right in front of a cop.
The funniest visual is easily Randy bouncing around on himself like he's on a hoppity hop, but one of my favorite things about this episode is how, despite how obviously stupid Randy's scheme was, he has fully convinced all the other guys in town to also give themselves testicular cancer. And not just because of the medical card, Randy convinces them that there are numerous advantages.
I can have all the pot I want, I get around faster than walking, and wherever I need a seat, I can just sit on my balls.
This is, I think, a pretty important aspect of the episode in regards to Randy's characterization and evolution, because though it cannot be more clear how foolish his actions are in this episode, he is fully rewarded for them. Like, outside of the cancer, absolutely nothing comes back to bite him in the ass. His life markedly improves in pretty much every way. Sharon is even more attracted to him.
Oh, it's just that I thought some more alone time could maybe be real.
Hey, my eyes are up here.
It would be one thing if Randy's stupidity was leading to major consequences, but in this instance, easily the stupidest thing he has ever done led only to positives in his life, which I think absolutely leads to his continued foolish behavior that we see in the ensuing decade. In fact, the only real consequence Randy experiences in this episode is that he can't fit through doors anymore, which means he can't get into the dispensary. The real consequence comes on the black market chicken side of things, as crime and violence worsens around the growing chicken cartel activity. And in classic South Park fashion, everyone takes the exact wrong lessons from the entire ordeal.
Once again, marijuana is illegal!
Despite the clear connection to the black market chicken trade, they blame the growing crime and violence on weed. And even more hilariously, the doctor thinks he's figured out why there's been a rise in cancer.
Ever since we got rid of KFC, we've seen a great rise in cancer. But today we welcome back KFC and all the medical benefits it gives us.
This is an iconic and beloved episode for a reason. It really is just the absolute perfect cross-section of everything people love about South Park. Between Cartman and Randy's hilarious, character-driven insanity, and the way the fast food and medical marijuana plots perfectly interweave and reverse roles, it's just got all the hallmarks of a top-tier South Park episode. I mean, it even made such a splash that KFC themselves had to respond to its depiction of the Colonel in an interview. A spokesman had this to say in response.
As you might expect, KFC Corporation was not contacted by Comedy Central for permission to use our brand in South Park. We had absolutely no say in the show's content.
But I think that the biggest impact this episode would have is in just how far they realized they could push Randy. I mentioned some of the obsessive Randy plots that came before this, but as I said multiple times, this is the height of his stupidity. And one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough is just how foreshadowing this entire endeavor would be for the future of Randy, i.e. Tegridy Farms. Obviously, Randy's entire trajectory led to the Tegridy arc, and I lay that out pretty clearly in my Evolution of Randy Marsh video, but Medicinal Fried Chicken not only showcased his obsessive tendencies, but the absurd risks he was willing to take. And while shoving his junk in the microwave to give himself cancer is still absolutely the dumbest thing Randy has ever done, the closest he's come since have primarily been Tegridy Farms schemes. Blowing up citizens' home grow ops, I mean that's basically terrorism, making deals with the Chinese government, straight up murdering an entire herd of cows while trying to peddle meatless Tegridy burgers. Let's not even talk about the pangolin. While tons of Randy's behavior over the years naturally escalated to his complete lack of Tegridy in the Tegridy Farms arc, in retrospect, Medicinal Fried Chicken was such an obvious foreshadow to exactly what we could expect, and nearly 10 years before the Tegridy arc even began. Though I think it's also interesting that most fans really love Medicinal Fried Chicken, but many are not major fans of the whole Tegridy Farms arc. Perhaps the answer to why Tegridy Farms isn't as beloved lies in the underlying message of this episode, that there is absolutely such thing as overdoing it. Too much of a good thing and all that. Maybe the occasional Medicinal Fried Chicken is all the Tegridy we need. South Park has run for 24 years and over 300 episodes, so obviously they've told a lot of stories over the years, but unlike its other cartoon contemporaries with massive episode numbers like The Simpsons or Family Guy, South Park has continuously been run by only 2 people. This is nothing short of miraculous. Even The Simpsons changed showrunners every 2 years for its first 8 seasons, allowing for fresh new voices and ideas to cycle in and out of the writer's room. And while South Park does have plenty of other staff members to help run and write the show, at the end of the day, the entire series is filtered through Matt Stone and particularly Trey Parker, who writes and directs every single episode. In fact, it's actually comical to scroll through the episode listings and just see the walls of Trey Parker's name lining the credits. But making over 300 episodes of television is not easy, especially when there are just 2 guys in charge. And obviously, the show has changed a lot over the years. Often events happening within the series are reflections of how Matt and Trey were feeling at the time those episodes were produced. But there were 2 episodes in season 15 that not only blatantly showcased Matt and Trey's feelings on South Park at the time, but also laid a vague roadmap that could help predict exactly where the show was going to go. So today, let's talk about South Park's midlife crisis from season 15, You're Getting Old. So as I mentioned up top, South Park has seen many changes over the years, but there are a few that stand out most prominently. For years, the show focused pretty much exclusively on the 4 boys, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny. Sometimes the stories ventured into the adults' lives, but the focus was always on the boys. Eventually, however, South Park started to show much more of a focus on Randy, Stan's dad, partially because he became a standout comedic character, and partially because as they got older, Matt and Trey simply related to the older characters more than the younger characters. Matt Stone even mentioned this at their 20th anniversary panel.
Yeah, and we're old now, so you know we are. It's like there's a lot. That's why Randy's become a big character.
And the episode You're Getting Old showcased these feelings in 2 brilliant ways. They showed both Stan and Randy struggle to come to terms with the fact that they're getting older, with Stan feeling confused that he isn't enjoying life in the same ways anymore, and Randy feeling concerned that his life and the world are passing him by. The episode brilliantly showcases Stan's dilemma when his new Tween Wave album doesn't sound good to him anymore. This is initially believed to just be Stan getting older and growing out of certain things, which it is, but there's an extra layer of confusion thrown into the mix when other music that adults enjoy also sounds awful to Stan. In fact, everything starts to sound and look like shit to Stan. Movies all look terrible. Food looks inedible. Even his friends start to look like shit. The world just seems shitty to Stan. And the doctor says the culprit is...
It's a condition called being a cynical asshole.
At that same 20th anniversary panel, Trey Parker actually talked briefly about this episode and confirmed that this was how he was feeling at the time.
There was one where Stan just decided everything was shit, you know, and to a lot of people, they're like, that felt like the last show. And I was like, that's how I was feeling.
But you can tell that this dilemma was also being told through Randy's story in the episode. Through Randy, we see that concern that the world is changing around him and that he can't keep up. Randy's entire story focuses on how he desperately wants to appreciate and understand these new trends, but he simply doesn't.
No, it doesn't sound like crap to me.
Randy and Sharon have a pretty major fight in the episode, and that fight highlights what I believe are some of the very real concerns that Matt and Trey were fighting. In the commentary for this episode, the pair of them talk about how the story was meant to be commenting on the sitcom nature of their own show, and how everything just resets week to week. And you can tell that this is what they're talking about.
The same shit just happens over and over, and then in a week it just all resets until it happens again.
And so Matt and Trey decided that ending the show on a more somber existential note was actually the right move. As Fleetwood Mac's Landslide plays, the episode ends without the story resetting back to normal. Randy and Sharon get divorced. Stan moves out of his house and into an apartment with his mom. Everything still looks like shit to him, and the episode just ends. Now, the most interesting thing about this is that so many people read this ending as Matt and Trey being entirely finished with South Park, which was not their intention at all. But it was a mid-season finale, and there was a huge break between this and the next set of episodes, leading to endless speculation and even questions about it while they were doing press for Book of Mormon. But Matt and Trey maintained that it was more of a commentary on the sitcom nature of South Park, and not a thinly veiled hint that the duo didn't want to make the show anymore. But interestingly, in the follow-up episode, Asperger's, the duo actually felt like they had to revert everything to the status quo.
Some of the ideas were that we were gonna just keep going like this. Stan lives in an apartment with his mom, and we were just gonna have the show go on like that. And we came up with all these different ideas of how to keep it like this, and
we were gonna do a serialized thing.
Yeah, do a serialized thing where he slowly through the course of the season tried to get his parents back together, but like we finally were like, we're just kind of stuck. We just don't really have a choice. Things are going to have to just reset.
And I think this is actually sort of the key to understanding what Matt and Trey were working through with these episodes, consciously or subconsciously. One of the most interesting things about this episode is that the dialogue for Randy and Sharon's big fight was written the Tuesday morning before the show aired. And also that using the music track Landslide was approved Tuesday night. They had backups ready to go, but as they claimed, none of the other ones felt right. And while they might not have had some grand plan for that conversation between Randy and Sharon, or the landslide montage at the end, I think these things might be some of the purest expressions of how they were feeling about South Park, because of how they came about. They were quickly and genuinely created, maybe more likely to come from the heart. They weren't written and rewritten over and over. And I think this especially lines up with what we've seen from the show in subsequent years, because while they felt pigeonholed into maintaining the status quo here in season 15, seasons 18 through 23 started to shake things up in major ways with the introduction of more serialized story elements, most notably Tegridy Farms. Moving the Marsh family to Tegridy Farms feels like an extension of this inclination that Matt and Trey had back in season 15, where they wanted to shake things up, but then had second thoughts. And fittingly, I think the lyrics to Landslide actually illustrate this better than anything else. I'd play the song for you, but it's one of the most famous songs in the world, so I'll just have to read the lyrics. I've been afraid of changing because I built my life around you, but time makes you bolder, children get older, and I'm getting older too. In Asperger's, Matt and Trey were literally afraid of changing the show they had built their life around. They wanted to, but they were afraid to do it. But as the song says, time made them bolder, and as they got older, they were more willing to take these kinds of risks for the sake of their own happiness.
Because I'm unhappy, okay? I've been unhappy for a long time.
Matt and Trey may not have intended this episode to be some big statement about how they felt about South Park, but I think that subconsciously, this paved the road for what the show would become over the past 9 years. This was the first hint that they were interested in trying new, riskier methods of storytelling, and they've since experimented with this stuff, and some of those choices have paid off, while others have been derailed by real-world events. But I expect that if they hadn't been willing to take these risks, their interest in South Park may have dwindled. And this is even something we're continuing to see to this day. The vaccination special back in March, while doing certain things to re-establish the old status quo, like reintroduce old Garrison, they're also setting up major changes. The boys sort of split up their friend group, implying that they aren't going to be as close anymore. A pretty bold move for the series to make in its 24th season. Personally, I'm all for these changes, and I can't wait to see what they decide to do next. Because time makes us bolder, children get older, and I'm getting older too. South Park's 27th season just dropped its 3rd episode, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but it seems as though the show has entirely lost its Tegridy. Farms. Tegridy Farms is gone. After a couple of episodes of more biting political commentary that made major waves, this week they probably made a smart call in crafting a more character-focused episode driven by Randy. Of course, it definitely still fit in plenty of that biting political and social commentary, and made sure to feature the new Saddam model of Trump once again. As usual, there is plenty to go over, so let's dive into South Park Season 27, Episode 3, Sycophancy. Okay, so obviously with this week's episode seemingly ending the Tegridy Farms arc, the South Park headline is definitely going to make a bigger splash within the fandom than it is in the general public, unlike the previous 2 episodes. And with this only being the 3rd of 10 episodes airing every other week this year, I think dialing things in to have a bit more focus on, well, South Park characters was a smart move. But I thought this one had a really strong balance too. It wasn't like it entirely lacked that political and social commentary. The beginning of this season seems to be taking on a bit of a serialized light quality, like we saw in seasons 18 or 21, sort of bridging some of the things that were featured across many episodes, but not directly leading each episode into the next one. Since the last episode had a major focus on ICE, this one started with Randy's Tegridy Farm workers all being hauled away by ICE. And this all feels like a very Randy dilemma. Obviously, this guy isn't up in arms about ICE for any empathetic human rights reasons. He's just mad because they're taking his Mexicans.
Stupid ICE! They took my Mexicans again!
But even at the very top of this episode, they start to tease the potential end of Tegridy Farms. I mean, tell me where I've heard that before. I thought they were faking us out for sure. But as usual, Randy is sort of the Matt and Trey surrogate in the conversation, while the rest of the Marshes take on the role of much of the audience. I love when Sharon tells Randy that this was his dream and never theirs.
You guys never told me that.
Yes, we did.
I'm sorry, but I still think it's funny that South Park fans have complained about Tegridy Farms for like 7 years, and the show has mostly just mocked them. Let's put a pin in this, because obviously it's a big part of the end of the episode, so we'll talk a lot more about it later. Side note, did y'all notice that this puzzle Stan and Shelly are doing is Casa Bonita? It's not exactly the same, but they actually do have a super similar puzzle available at Casa Bonita's store. This episode was basically centered around Randy desperately trying to pivot Tegridy's business plan to prevent him from having to give up the farm, utilizing ChatGPT to guide him every step of the way, and bringing Towley along for the ride. I genuinely loved the tech pivot, renaming it to Tegridy and lambasting the fact that nobody understands a single thing modern tech startups even do anymore.
By harnessing AI, we've transformed from a quaint farm into a platform for innovation.
And in a bit of a jab at Elon Musk, Randy and Towley's tech pivot also comes alongside a new ketamine habit. Not only did I find this pretty funny, but this was our first example of Matt and Trey repurposing a premise from that season 27 trailer that was full of fake clips that they released back in April. Obviously delivered very differently, but it definitely showcases that the stuff they came up with earlier in the year isn't entirely off the table. So I feel like a Diddy episode is pretty likely at some point, but more importantly, maybe we'll get that Butters air traffic controller episode. I think this episode's biggest strength is the way it tied its social and political commentary together thematically. The bulk of this episode is centered on Randy overly relying on ChatGPT, something they seeded in the first episode of the season. Obviously, they had a big ChatGPT episode in season 26, which was over 2 years ago at this point, but AI's use and the way people rely on it for so much has truly grown exponentially since then. Hey, I mean, some people can't even write their South Park videos without it, and this episode is entirely driven by Randy utilizing ChatGPT to do just about everything for him. First, he tries to use it as a marriage counselor for him and Sharon, then it gives him a whole new business plan to save Tegridy Farms. Hell, it even breaks into an ICE detention center for him. But the social commentary here is clear and twofold. One, people are just absolutely overly reliant on this technology to an alarming degree. For some people, every single decision is run through AI, basically basically eliminating any need for problem solving or critical thinking. It's a big yikes. And 2, the way ChatGPT is programmed, it's just sucking up to the user and telling them what they want to hear. Hence the title's play on words, sicko fancy.
Hey, so what's a sycophant?
This actually comes on the heels of the most recent ChatGPT release, GPT-5, that actually dialed back its more friendly demeanor. And would you believe it if I told you that people didn't actually like that? They want their computers telling them they're special little guys. And so of course, all of Randy's terrible ideas are continually enabled by ChatGPT. And I thought it was pretty smart commentary to liken this to a classic sycophant, before a nice hard cut to all of the corporate suck-ups bringing Trump Hussein gifts to curry his favor. And obviously this idea didn't come from nowhere. Just 2 weeks ago, Tim Cook gifted Trump a 24-karat gold bar, and earlier this year there was a lot of discourse about the $400 million Boeing 747 Trump accepted as a gift from Qatar Airlines. Both gifts were referenced here in the episode. I also appreciated that we got a couple cameos from some of the billionaires the show has lambasted in the past, including Zuckerberg and the massive-brained Bezos from season 22, who is of course designed after the aliens from the original Star Trek pilot The Cage. But yeah, this was just a really tightly written episode on a thematic level, and the way it tied these two sides of the story together narratively was all through Towley. Basically, Randy sends Towley to DC so he can also curry favor from Trump Hussein, basically attempting to lower weed's drug classification federally. And this entire sequence is just Mr. Towley Goes to Washington. It's pretty great. They just do a full-on homage to the 1939 classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, recreating the montage as Jimmy Stewart arrives in DC. They use the same music and parody many of the biggest beats of the montage, with a few key differences. For one, Towley's version is just caked with military presence due to Trump's recent takeover, bringing in tons of National Guard to our nation's capital. They pretty faithfully recreate the moments at the Jefferson statue and the Lincoln Memorial, though this time their faces have all been fully Trumpified, and both are once again showcasing what little he's packing. Pretty funny how persistent they are in showcasing this every episode this season. That's that good old Matt and Trey stubbornness I like to see. I don't know, I thought it was kind of funny to see people concerned that this was going to be a Towley episode, but I really think Vernon Chapman's performance as Towley is always so funny, and he had some absolutely killer line deliveries in this one.
Wow, this is gonna be so easy.
I genuinely just loved seeing Towley jaunt through occupied DC, wowed by everything he sees. And Mr. Towley Goes to Washington wasn't even the only fun movie homage we got here. Towley's actual meeting with Trump went full Return of the Jedi, with Randy in the Luke Skywalker role. Honestly, it's pretty funny that even in their relatively subdued Star Wars homage here, they liken Trump to a monstrous slave-owning mafia slug. They even make him do the Jabba laugh. They're really committed to just directly comparing Trump to any unflattering thing they can think of this year. And if you've seen Return of the Jedi, I'm sure you knew where this was going. Randy gifts Towley to Trump. It's clear that with the reaction the show has gotten from the White House and those that they've been lambasting in the current administration, South Park wants to keep prodding. And this week, I think they did a good job naturally tying this into the story at hand, whereas last week I felt like it maybe was a tad more forced. And they also seem to be doing something interesting with the storyline that feels like it's leading somewhere, at least with these last 2 episodes. I talked a lot in my last episode breakdown about how strange and abrupt that ending felt, and this week's didn't feel as abrupt, but it did feel just as ominous. Earlier in the episode, it seeds that Satan is pretty desperate to get out of this relationship and escape the White House, but it ends with him telling the newly enslaved Towley that that isn't going to happen for either of them. And this also makes me wonder about last week's ending as well. Obviously, we saw Mackie and Clyde make it to the plane, but we never actually saw them escape Mar-a-Lago. I'm now thinking this might have been intentional. Are all of these characters being imprisoned or trapped in one way or another, and will this come into play later in the season? Again, it definitely feels like these aspects are leading somewhere. Okay, let's talk about the real ending though. The ending that fans have seemingly been waiting for years. The way Randy's story wraps up here is facilitated through Sharon, which I really loved to see. Obviously, she gets the absolute brunt of Randy's foolish Tegridy Farms behavior, and after she realizes that ChatGPT is just enabling his terrible ideas, she co-opts ChatGPT's vocal style and demeanor to get Randy out of his combination anxiety spiral K-hole.
We have to sell the farm now just to be able to eat.
No problem. Would you like me to start laying out some exit strategies for you?
But it really does seem like this is it. the end of Tegridy Farms. After teasing and mocking the end of it so many times before, the Marshes have actually packed it up and sold the farm. It's truly the end of an era, and honestly, though I know so many fans are stoked about this, I'm kinda sad to see it go. Tegridy Farms officially lasted from October 17th, 2018 to August 20th, 2025. Nearly 7 years for 32 standard episodes and 9 specials. I definitely understand that Tegridy is sort of a monument to Randy trending towards main character status, and I think that is a valid complaint. But I think the complaints that the stories were one note or repetitive were a little overblown and kind of surface level. Over this era, the show had a major variety of stories facilitated through Tegridy Farms, and I found a lot of them to be really fun and inspired. I feel like now that it's over, it will probably be looked back on a bit more fondly as time goes on. I think I'm going to do a bit of a retrospective on the era within the next month or so look out for that. But even as an honest fan of Tegridy Farms, I do think it's fair to say that it had run its course. And I think it's particularly hard to argue with how and why they've stamped this moment in time as the end.
Right now, there's just no place for Tegridy.
Too true, Randy. But the Marshes' move back to South Park does leave a lot of questions. Can Randy just go back to work as a geologist, or will he have to find a new job? And will that be part of the story for the rest of the season? It seems as though they're just going to move back into their old house, but what about Tolkien's family? They still live on Credigree Farms right across the street from Tegridy. Are they going to write them back into the main part of town, or are they just going to stay at Credigree, maintaining that connection to Tegridy Farms? It also makes me wonder how many of the other series developments they might decide to start walking back. They already found a way to keep Garrison in town instead of moving him to the White House. PC Principal has transitioned to Power Christian mode, but will they still keep him on the roster? Will Principal Victoria make a return? Honestly, PC Principal is way funnier. I hope he sticks around. And while I love Randy, I do hope the retreat from Tegridy means a return to some stories focused on the 4 boys. Honestly, the best way for them to open the 4th episode of the season would be a classic boys at the bus stop shot. I feel like we haven't gotten a good Kenny episode since like The Scoots, which was actually just 1 episode after the very first Tegridy Farms episode. Let's get some Kenny episodes in here. Regardless, with where this season has gone through its first 3 episodes, I genuinely just have no idea what to expect for episode 4, and that is pretty exciting. Obviously, I expect some Trump Hussein stuff again, but generally the direction of these episodes has, to some degree, surprised me every time. We of course have another 2-week wait till the next episode, so season 27 episode 4 will release on September 4th. Keep an eye out for that. But I want to know what you think about not just this episode, but the entire Tegridy Farms era. How do you feel now that it's finally over? And make sure to stay tuned. I'll be covering the new season every step of the way. Oh God, I'm in a hole.